Quick warning, due to the sheer power of this build, I will need to show later DLC bosses to prove how strong it is. The only thing that will be off limits today is the final boss itself. And before you say, ugh, an Ironjar required build, no, Ironjar Armoatic just takes this to 11 out of 10. The Ironjar lets you technically just press a single input, press a button once, and then just hold it down until the boss dies, because it still, kicks ass even without Ironjar, as you will see playing in the background in the video. What this is then is a build focused entirely around the Dancing Blade of Ranah, a new extremely high dexterity scaling weapon that is paired curved swords, with a unique Ash of War called Unending Dance that has you just spin and spin like a beautiful ballerina of death because you're also holding swords. The only limiting factor of this Ash of War then really is stamina, as it costs very minimal FP to use, and it doesn't even use as much stamina as you would think, honestly, given that fact. Personally, I love weapon skills that are based on stamina because they let you do some really funky things with them, and this one is actually no different. The only other way that this could have been stronger, honestly, is if the weapon also had bleed buildup on it or was infusible, but it doesn't. That said, let's talk about exactly how to make this weapon as strong as you've been seeing in the background with Ironjar Aromatic or without, and we'll talk about why it works, what you need to have, and how to actually play around our setup, though I should mention I'll be assuming that you already have any of the components from the base game. First up then, what exactly are we doing to make this work? The main thing is taking advantage of the generally high weapon scaling and incredibly rapid infinite hit potential with this weapon, and then pairing it with all of the different ways of boosting damage with successive attacks in the game. What this does then normally is slowly build up a damage increase every time you hit with a weapon, and the longer you go between each weapon hit, the more this buff falls off. With most weapons, you can keep it relatively active, oftentimes starting it up at the beginning of a combo so it's at high value for the finisher at the end of it, but this is one of the few weapons that can keep it at full buff for the full duration that you are holding down the button, just because of the speed and ceaseless nature of the weapon hits. Without Ironjar, the way that we use this is simply by using the Ash of War in any openings that you get, whether you get 2 hits out of it, or 4 hits, or 6 hits, you can consistently find openings to get a bunch of attacks in really quickly between your opponent's hits, here or there, and the speed of the actual weapons will actually activate the buffs as you go very easily. Generally speaking though, the weapons just scale incredibly well, so even if you are in a situation where you can't just spam hold down the weapon skill, you still just have an incredibly potent pair of curved swords that you can actually use as a weapon. That said, let's go into the full build. First we have the weapons themselves, and these come from the boss that wields them in the southern nameless mausoleum just off of the Cerulean coast, the west side. The entrance is here on your map, but I'll just show you the full route so that there's no confusion. Then you're going to need a seal. Any seal will do. Except that one, but preferably you want a weightless seal, as we are only casting buff incantations, which don't work off of incantation scaling or use requirements at all. Past that, there is your armor set, and there is actually a set that specifically boosts this, which is the Dancer's armor set that drops from the same place as the weapon, and these seem to boost your damage by a total of 10% with all 4 pieces of it on. And if you want to min-max, that is the way, that's the armor set that you want to use. Otherwise, of course, you should feel free to use a set for your own fashion preferences. For your talismans, you absolutely want the Shard of Alexander. 15% boost to weapon skill damage is of course extremely tasty when that is our main way of fighting and our main goal of boosting. Then there's the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia Talisman for a boost to damage after successive weapon hits. This is one of our biggest damage boosters in the build. Then we have Millicent's Prosthesis, which is a smaller version of the exact same effect, but with the bonus of +5 dexterity as a stat, which allows us to just have slightly more levels to spend elsewhere. Then in your final slot, for anything reasonably hard, any difficult boss that is hitting you with big attacks, you probably do want Dragon Crest Great Shield to make up for our defensive shortcomings from wearing such a light armor set. Otherwise, something like the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman is at least a decent fit, increasing your stamina regeneration by around 25%, so you can dance a bit more frequently and with less breaks in between, as, you know, all dancers really want to do. Past that, then there is your Wondrous Flask of Physic, in which we have the Thorny Cracked Tear, which has a similar effect to 2 of our talismans, boosting attack power after successive attacks, and further synergizing with the speedy and consistent weapon hits of the build. Then for your second slot, there is a choice between either the Opaline Hard Tier for just 15% increased all damage negation to help again shore up our defenses further, or if the boss isn't hitting you that hard, you can instead use the brand new Bloodsucking Cracked Tier for a 20% boost to your damage for 3 minutes at the cost of, you know, draining around 1 to 2% of your health per second. This is dangerous against hard hitters for sure. If a fight goes rough, this can be a thing that will make it go rougher, but with Ironjar and with a setup that is as fully powerful as this one, you can sort of just power through and murder the hell out of most bosses before it even really makes more of a difference than, you know, just getting hit by the bosses would, as it would take around 30 seconds for that to even do a flash worth of damage while active. To get this tier then, you need to first have some hefty furnace pots. The cookbook for the crafting recipe for these is in the shack here, just a short ride from the Great Bridge north side of Grace. Once you have that cookbook, craft yourself some furnace pots, and then you need to go to the Ruins of Unte at the Castle Watering Hole side of Grace. Then you want to climb up these walls on the runes themselves that are on the northern side. You need to wrap around like this so you can get to this little balcony over here, and then you want to prepare for a boss fight because you're about to activate it by throwing a hefty furnace pot directly into the head basket thing to bring this furnace golem back to life. Once you defeat it, you'll get yourself this tier, and a little bonus tip here is if you craft extra furnace pots and you're still standing up here anyways, just throw a couple more into its head basket, and if you hit one right after the other, you'll pretty much just kill it instantly. And then finally we have our buffs, which are Golden Vow as an incantation. This gives us 15% bonus damage and 10% damage negation for 80 seconds, and then Flame Grant Me Strength for 20% physical and fire damage bonus for 30 seconds. Then there's the Ironjar Aromatic that we talked about earlier that you can farm a few of and stock up a bit, and then just use for boss fights when needed. What this actually is then, because I haven't really actually explained it if you don't already know, is it basically just increases your poise just an absolutely insane amount. It does make you heavy roll, it makes you very difficult to actually move, you can't sprint, nothing like that. So basically you have to either move with your weapon skills or let the boss come to you with this. What it does do though is take up a body buff slot, so if you're using Ironjar Aromatic, you won't be using Flame Grant Me Strength. They do sort of just replace each other. Then past that, then there is of course the stats that you want with this build. 60 Vigor, so that you don't get one shot by bosses, of course. 14 Mind for just a bit of bonus FP because it doesn't hurt. 20 Endurance, which is more than you need for our weight limit, but gives you the extra stamina to keep the weapon skill running a bit longer before needing to take a break. Then we go 9 Strength is the minimum that is required for the weapon if you need it on top of your base stats. 75 Dexterity, which would bring us to 80 with our Talismans, which is the soft cap for dexterity weapon scaling. And then finally you just want 25 Faith so you can cast our buffing incantations. Past that, you may have a few levels left depending on your starting class, and you can put those sort of where you want. I would recommend Endurance if you just want more stamina, which will help you with the longer health bar bosses. With that then, the actual gameplay is quite simple. Spin into enemies, watch them die. If they have too much poise or are doing attacks, dodge the attacks, and then just start again with minimal loss. It's honestly not that complex, and it gets even simpler once you're using Ironjar Aromatics, because then your goal is just to hit the enemies or drink a potion if you need to. Otherwise, there's not really much more considerations than that, especially because the weapon skill itself is also a lot of forward movement, so it is your way of closing the gap when you have an Ironjar in your system. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A fun, infinitely spinning, unbelievably fast, and consistently attacking, super high scaling dex weapon build, just taken to the absolute maximum. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I know you'll you'll enjoy using this one for yourself if you try it out too, because I know I have myself. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.